If there's one thing you can count on from Timex, it's their ability to bring back classic vintage designs with just the right modern twist. And of course, their indigo backlight shines just as bright as I remember as a kid. Watching Timex evolve over the past few years has been really exciting. It started with the launch of the Q Timex Reissue collection in 2019, and more recently, they've kept that momentum going with the Deepwater Reef 200 lineup, first revealed in October of 2024. I've always had a soft spot for Timex, and looking back at my watch collection journey, they were there from the beginning. I had no idea back then that Timex would help lay the foundation for a lifelong passion, and like many of you, one of my first watches was a Timex, the classic Ironman Digital. It withstood all the chaos of my teenage adventures, and somehow kept ticking through it all. Since then, I've had at least 100 watches come and go, ranging from affordable everyday pieces to luxury staples like Rolex and Cartier. But no matter how far down the rabbit hole I've gone, I'll always appreciate where it all started. I think what makes me so happy to see about Timex is they're just as relevant as they are today as they were a few decades ago. Timex was one of the first American watch brands to embrace quartz technology, and fast forward, they're continuing to excel in not just making reliable and super cool quartz watches, but offering a great balance of affordability and quality. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're the best watch brands ever, or their watches are all perfect home runs. But when it comes to the best watch brands in the $50 to $200 price range, who design and develop in-house and have legit watchmaking heritage, Timex is up there with some of the best. I'll be honest though, when I first started getting serious about watch collecting, it was all about the automatics. And I would kind of laugh at quartz-powered timepieces, which is a bit wild because a majority of the entry-level automatic movements are not really known for accuracy. We're talking plus or minus 20 to 40 seconds per day accuracy, whereas with quartz, the timekeeping is much better, probably around 1 second per month. I admit I have a habit of using my phone to check the time, but if the purpose of a watch is to tell time, it makes sense to go with quartz. What's weird though is quartz is often frowned upon in the watch community, and I did have that sentiment for a long time, but I think it is a bit misguided. I guess long story short is give quartz a chance and don't hold it against Timex as a legit player in the watch game. With that said, today we're taking a look at one of their most recent releases. Everybody, meet the 1995 Intrepid Reissue. If you're thinking this watch looks really cool and unique, you'd be thinking what I'm thinking. And if you're also wondering if that button on the side of the watch that says Indiglo lights up the dial, it sure does, and it's super bright and really satisfying to use. If you like bright lume but get a little frustrated by watches not living up to your expectations, Indiglo solves that problem for sure. What's interesting is the indigo backlight was first introduced in 1992 on the Ironman. So being that was my first Timex watch, seeing it on this new release does bring a big smile to my face. And not to get too sidetracked here, but I came across this story about the indigo light and how it helped someone escape safely during the 1993 World Trade bombing. It was the only light source the person had, and that story made headlines. But this watch isn't all about the indigo light. There's a lot going on, and it's definitely a fun, refreshing tool watch. The watch industry has been really busy the past handful of years with very traditional dive watch heavy focus, and this new Timex is definitely a departure from all of that. The layout, the colors, the case shape, and the bezel, everything flows really nicely together and just creates such a cool and unique watch. As much as you could use it to go diving with, it is a lot smarter than that. On top is a slide rule bezel that features logarithmic scales that allow you to tackle calculations like multiplication, division, percentages, and other unit conversions. A calculator dive watch was never really on my bucket list, but here we are and I'm all for it. Although I try not to have to do very much math in my day-to-day, it's better to be prepared than caught off guard without my new trusty slide rule bezel. Before deciding to pull the trigger on this watch, I did notice the size and the overall dimensions. It's definitely a beefier watch than I typically go for, so I was on the fence, but I have been wanting to add some larger size watches into my collection, so I ended up pressing the submit order button and really glad I did. I've been rocking 38 to 41 millimeter watches a lot the past few years and definitely like the comfort it offers, especially on my 7-inch wrist. But I did forget how awesome a bit larger of a watch looks. It naturally has more wrist presence, and it's just easier to see the little details, which is a big part of a watch's design. Especially on a watch like this with all the different features, everything can stand out and pop that much more. This is definitely a robust, well-built watch, and that was really noticeable when I first unboxed it. There's a nice hefty weight to it, solid steel construction, and nice details on the finishing, along the case, and bezel. It's quite cool how Timex executed the brushing. The case is fully brushed with some circular and vertical micro details, and it looks like the bezel has a slightly different brushed finish, almost like a sandblasted treatment. However it was achieved, it does create a nice contrast and a good separation between those two parts. The dimensions come in at 46 millimeters in diameter and only 11 millimeters in thickness. I think this is a big reason why the watch not only looks awesome on the wrist, it also wears really balanced. It's because of the thin profile. But I do think another factor is the strap it comes equipped on. It's a synthetic rubber that I didn't really pay too much attention to at first, and that was my bad. There's a ton of details that add a lot of cool visuals and character to the overall design. Even the back has an interesting execution that I assume is designed for comfort and allowing the wrist to breathe with the gaps it creates. I do love to switch up the look of a watch and have far too many watch straps, so I couldn't resist showing the watch off on a few different options. What I say next might ruffle some feathers, but let me explain before jumping to conclusions. The crystal protecting this crisp white dial is made of mineral. What? The audacity. But it's quite simple why. Clarity. I totally get it though. Sapphire is the optimal choice for scratch resistance. And that is true, but so many of them have quite poor clarity, mainly due to reflections. And as I've been getting more and more into filming watches, this has never been more noticeable. Mineral crystal really aids in legibility and letting the cool details on a dial shine in its glory. Even with anti-reflective coatings on sapphire crystals, it never guarantees a clear view. And as you can see, the crystal on this watch does an amazing job avoiding very many reflections, which I'm very thankful for because I'm no Spielberg with the camera. I definitely don't have a watch that looks anything like this one, and that was a big part of its appeal. The crown at the 4 o'clock and bright green pusher at the 9 to activate the indigo backlight, it's all just really stylish and very much Timex. It also has a screw-down crown and 100 meters of water resistance, so it would make for a great everyday watch. It is a reissue from the 90s and gained a bit of popularity thanks to it being seen on the wrist of John F. Kennedy Jr. I do have a confession though. I'm a bit addicted to two parts of this watch. The first is playing around with this indigo light. There's something very satisfying about seeing how bright it is and reminds me a bit of those night vision goggles you'll see in movies and everything shows up as green. It's also super bright and seems a lot more functional than traditional lume, since that does require activation with the light source and doesn't often last very long. The second is this bezel action. Rotating it has such a cool, very tool-like feel. It also has a very enjoyable rotation, hitting each groove perfectly with no backplay. The clicking sound is also quite nice, and not the bezel action I'm used to from Timex. This watch will likely not be as huge of a success as any of the Q Timex watches or Deepwater Reef 200s, but it's definitely a total home run and great to see Timex releasing unique watches and more throwbacks from their archives. The watch is priced at $199, which I think is a fair price for all that you get and the overall build quality. It's kind of funny. I never go diving, so I don't use my dive watches for that purpose. And now with the slide rule bezel, I have another function on the same watch I'll never use, and that's doing math. I'm all about the indigo light anyway. I'm definitely curious what you all think of this watch, so do let me know. Is it priced right? Does it have a cool design, or is it a little nerdy? Well, that's all for today. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.